Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's movie vlog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today I wanted to first apologize because if you hear some random clicking in the background, it's because my UPS, my uninterrupted power supply, has been acting up because of course I can't go even 2 weeks without having some issue with the various things that I got for my PC, including my UPS. Hopefully I can get in contact with someone to get it fixed or addressed, but it was very good for about a week, didn't make any sounds, and now it just keeps on clicking every time my computer turns on, every time I do something intensive on the computer, and now it just randomly will just do it for any time my computer is on. It will do it over the course of an hour, hour and a half, and I don't really understand why. So anyway, with all that being said, Star Wars finally reveals Darth Vader's real father. Now, this has actually piqued a lot of people's interest for a very long time because, as we know, that was revealed to us by the prequels. When Shmi is asked about who the father of Anakin Skywalker is, Shmi, his mother, simply says that it was essentially miraculous, that basically it was the Force, that it was insinuated that he was born of the Force, that there was no father, and so therefore we all speculate based on what the information that we're given that it was almost like an immaculate conception, or even more so, almost like an incarnation of the Force itself, which explains why Anakin was so strong with the Force, why he had a high midichlorian count, as was revealed to us, was the source of the Force, no pun intended there, by George Lucas when he made the prequels, which obviously has gotten a lot of flack, and even I personally think it's kind of silly, but at the end of the day, it does seem to at least be part of the canon at this point, and they have not done anything to really do away with it. But the big reveal has finally happened, so if you do not want to know, if you're a comic books reader, and you do not want to know one of the recent issues of the Darth Vader comic that's come out that's revealed this information, then just go ahead and skip this video. But yeah, the big reveal is that it was indeed Emperor Palpatine. So that's actually quite interesting. So basically what we find out from the comic is that Emperor Palpatine used the Force to essentially create Anakin Skywalker within Shmi, which one creates a very interesting dynamic because essentially, even though sex is not involved, Palpatine is essentially the father, and does make even more clear why they have such a great relationship. Not only because Anakin is strong in the Force, but now it's almost like Palpatine treated Anakin the way that he did, looked after him, made him his apprentice, etc., because he is essentially the father of Anakin, because he was the one that manipulated the Force in order for this birth to actually happen. But it also does raise a lot of interesting questions. For example, when Palpatine reveals the information saying that there was a person who had control over life and death, is that someone actually his former master that he was the apprentice of? And obviously that person must have had some idea, since Palpatine was able to essentially create life. Now, of course, he couldn't just create it out of thin air. He did need a woman. He did need Shmi in order for that to actually take place. He couldn't just do it out of nowhere. But it does still bring an interesting concept. It still does bring up an interesting thought that you do have the capacity essentially to bring life by the Force. And here we get even further into it because now this might be the direction. Part of me thinks that they might be revealing this now because it's been speculated for a very long time that he was created by a Force user because of obviously the revelation that we got in the prequels. And some people, I know that Outpost Dyer, one of my patrons, so a huge shout out to Outpost Dyer, his own theory on the subject was that it was probably Darth Plagueis, that somehow Darth Plagueis was involved in the process, that he was very powerful in the Force, and that maybe he was somehow involved in the process of this person being created out of the Force. If not him, then maybe, just maybe, it was going to be Emperor Palpatine's master. So that was actually something that he put forward, and his theory, taking it a step further, was that maybe that is how Rey came into existence within the sequel trilogy. Maybe Rey, being so powerful in the Force, and also her parentage being very much in question. I know that some people are trying to say, oh, well, you know, Rian Johnson made it very clear that she had that her parents were a bunch of losers and they just abandoned her, and anyone can be good at the Force. Now, I hope they don't play it that way because that's just stupid. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, and it just flies in the face of everything that's been established already within the Star Wars universe, which says you need some kind of training. Even Anakin Skywalker, who we've now revealed, has now been revealed that he was indeed created by Force powers, by Emperor Palpatine. That tells us that he had a very high midichlorian count, because he was essentially part Force in a lot of ways, and therefore it explains why he was so Force sensitive. But even he, guess what, needed training. Even this person who was birthed out of the Force needed some kind of formal training in order to do anything. So maybe he was a little bit easier to, or maybe it was easier for him to be able to learn these various aspects of the Force. Maybe it was easier for him to become a warrior and all these other things because of his background. And that could explain, or at least help us understand better, why Rey might be so good. The problem is, and the difference is, that Rey never receives any training whatsoever. She just wills that she's able to do the mind, the Jedi mind trick, which she had never known about. Like, it's basically revealed to us that this is a person that is essentially isolated from the world itself, and she has some knowledge because she knows who Han Solo is, she knows a lot about the rebellion, but it's hard to imagine that she knew about the Jedi Force trick, the mind trick, that somehow a Jedi is able to change someone's mind, someone of the weak-minded, and that she would just be able to do that. It still doesn't make any sense. So maybe this reveal is setting up for us J.J. Abrams going back to this point and saying, okay, you know, Rian Johnson said that her parents are nobodies, but here I'm going to reveal to you that maybe it was somebody else. And so instead of her being the daughter of someone in particular, maybe indirectly it was the Force being used by some character. Maybe it was ObiWan Kenobi. Maybe ObiWan Kenobi started to play around after the Clone Wars, after Order 66. Maybe he fell into a certain area where he became very powerful with the Force and was looking into trying to create the Savior. Because the Savior concept had been around and had been understood by the Jedi Order. Then that's why the reason I thought that Anakin was the chosen one. They thought that Anakin was going to be the one that was promised. And eventually we realized it was still Anakin Skywalker, but obviously he needed his son, Luke, in order to help him along the way. You know, I still very much maintain that Anakin was indeed the chosen one, seeing that he was the one that took down the Emperor at the very end of the story, and also too, he was the one that eventually turned back essentially to the good side, which makes him more of a gray character than necessarily a Sith or Jedi person. And also at the very end, Jedi Force Ghost is revealed, which I think gives a little bit more credence to that. With all that being said, though, this does at least make some things a little bit interesting. Is J.J. Abrams going to take this story? Is J.J. Abrams going to take this concept of being created by the Force, being birthed essentially by the Force itself, to try and say, this is where Rey comes from, and this is why Rey is so good at the Force? Even if he does that, though, even if that does give us at least some understanding as to why she is so powerful and why she can go toe-to-toe with someone who's received formal training, even if all that is the case, it still is not going to be enough unless they're able to give us something a little bit more to explain why she is so good at the various aspects. Because as we've already established, even Anakin Skywalker, even someone who essentially is half Jedi, or rather not even half Jedi, is half Force, since it's now been confirmed that Palpatine used the Force to create him in his mother's womb, which again is very biblical when you think about it, even he needed some kind of training in order to do anything. Sure, he may have been able to do a few Jedi tricks because obviously he is very Force sensitive and is very powerful, but in order for him to do big things like fight with a lightsaber, or the Jedi mind trick, or a various other amount of Jedi tricks, or Jedi training, or rather Jedi specialties, he needed some kind of training for that. Just as a Sith, he needed some kind of training as well. So, unless J.J. Abrams is able to backtrack a bit and maybe give us a little bit more context. And you could even do this if you go back to the island where Luke Skywalker is, and in a flashback show her getting a more formal training. I don't think they're going to do that because that would require him to retcon a bit of The Last Jedi, and we know that they don't really want to touch that, or at least publicly they say they don't want to touch that. But I think it'd be really cool if JJ said, hey, we're listening to the fans and we understand that you want to know why these certain things happen and why these things have happened and why they don't make any sense within the context of the film, why don't make any sense, why The Last Jedi is just such a narrative mess, that we're actually going to address some of those points. And one of them very well could be the lineage of Rey, and possibly her being some kind of offspring of the Force, except instead of it being from evil, like with Emperor Palpatine, which might also help to explain why Anakin Skywalker was also very much drawn towards the dark side, why he had such a affinity essentially towards the dark side. Of course, we know that he was a little bit more of a mixed character than that, based on further revelations that we get within series like the Clone Wars, like Rebels, and also, of course, within the original trilogy itself. But maybe also we can finally get a better understanding of why Rey is just not only Force sensitive and very much Force sensitive, but also why she is so good at it. Anyway, that's just my thought on it. Obviously, I'm not trying to say that Episode 9 is therefore going to be amazing, or that this is even going to be used in Episode 9, but I do think it's good speculation at this point to say that this very well might be, especially since it's something that's being picked up by a lot of sources. I use fatherly.com because I'd never heard of it before, and a lot of the other sources that were picking it up were sources that I didn't really want to give any attention to, so that's the reason why I picked up this one instead. But a lot of news sources are picking this up, and so it does indeed make you wonder, is this them trying to possibly bring this into fruition into the actual original trilogy. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. If you like this video, smash that like button, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. You're an awesome and amazing group of people, and I love you all. Have a great day, and as always, God bless.